Finally, we come to the core of what are the attachment styles. So what are the categories that Ainsworth came up with, and what do they mean actually? So originally, Ainsworth categorized these children that she observed in the strange situation test into three particular types. Those three were the secure type, the anxious-ambivalent type, and the avoidant type. These were the three main categories that Mary Ainsworth and her colleagues observed, and they started to categorize the children based on those traits into these three categories. And these three have been followed even today. So attachment theory, attachment theory, even as a basis for psychotherapy, even if you as a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist is using attachment theory, you would clearly see these three types play out, not just in children, but also in adults. Okay. Yeah. Secure, anxious, ambivalent, avoidant. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to come back to that. Let's just go over this first. Okay. So there was a fourth type, which is the disorganized attachment, which was later added to this categorization. And the reason for that was because later on, when this strange situation test was actually conducted, they saw that there was some children who didn't fit into any of those three categories, but they had a category of their own. So then the disorganized attachment was later added on. And now I'm going to go over what are these types and what are they defined by. First, we are going to go over what it looks like in children. So you have the secure attachments, you greet parents with positive emotions. You have the anxious ambivalent attachment, you are wary of strangers. There's more in that. That's not the only thing. Avoidant attachment may avoid parents. Again, more. Disordered or disorganized attachment is confusion or apprehension. So let's start with the secure attachment. What would a secure child behave like? So what Ainsworth saw was that there were particular mother and child dyads. Most of them were falling in the secure category. And what these babies did was that when the mother came back from leaving the child with the stranger, they were not particularly afraid of the stranger. They were a little bit cautious in approaching the stranger and playing with her, but they looked, and this is again a function of attachment, is they would take cues from the mother. So if the mother encouraged them to approach the stranger and play with the stranger, they were happily, approaching the stranger, playing with the stranger, and not really afraid. And then if the mother left them with the stranger, they showed a little bit of distress, but they were not particularly distressed. Once they were left alone, obviously because they are young babies, they showed a lot of distress. Now, these are not the most important things, because up until this point, all babies are the same. They will show, most of them will show similar sort of distress if on being left alone. What was important was what the baby did when the mother came back. So when it came to securely attached babies, they obviously cried. They showed a lot of protest and anger towards the mother for leaving the baby alone. But once the mother picked up the child and comforted the child and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't want to leave you, but I had to really run out," or whatever, just kind of soothed the baby, the secure babies generally immediately calmed down, and they immediately clung to the mother, and the mother child dyad returned back to a state of normalcy and a state of love and bonding. So there was no distress between the mother and the child. This was the securely attached. The anxious ambivalent babies showed much higher signs of distress when being left with the stranger. Most of them didn't want to approach the stranger at all, even after being reinforced by the mother that it's okay, you can go play with her, she's a nice lady. They didn't really want to interact. But even if they did, and even if they were fine, and even if they were okay to play with the stranger, once the mother left, uh, obviously distress was again very high. The frustration was very high, crying was extremely high. Now, what happened when the mother came back in anxious babies was that there was a lot of anger towards the mother. There was almost like these babies tended to cling to the mother, and almost violently or very, very emphatically strike the mother or bang their head against the mother, showing very clear signs of distrust, and showing very clear signs of anxiety and frustration at being left by the mother. And it was like almost as if suddenly there was a switch that was switched off in their brain. They would suddenly just sort of back off and say, okay, whatever. So there was no sort of the anxiety, as soon as it went up, it also suddenly would show that it subsided. So there was no sort of balance in the anxiety level. It was very fluctuating. With the avoidant children, what happened was when the mother came back, the babies didn't show too much desire to be with the mother. They were quite okay that the mother left them. They may show some distress, but then when the mother came back, the way the secure babies or the anxious babies immediately clung to the mother, these children were a little bit slow to warm up to the mother, or a little bit slow to kind of attach to the mother and go and cling to the mother and say, why did you leave me, where were you? There was this sort of avoidant behavior. Or in very extreme cases where, and this is what Ainsworth said, was where there were cases of abuse against children, they actually preferred to go to the stranger and not the mother. So this was something that was revolutionary for Ainsworth to see, is that in some cases they showed preference to actually go towards the stranger who entered the room and not the mother, and they actively avoided their own caregiver. And then the fourth category, which was the disorganized category, the reason why it's called the confused category is because these children sometimes show secure behavior, sometimes show ambivalent behavior, sometimes they show avoidant behavior. They were all over the place. So there wasn't really a very clear sign of, one particular attachment style. And so then later on, this fourth disorganized category was added when they showed, more of not so much secure, but more of a mix between anxiety, anxious attachment, and avoidant attachment.